Hello. Today I'm going to talk about the theme of suffering and isolation and how they kind of feed into each other. And I'm going to use Annie Dillard's short essay, The Deer at Providencia, um, to talk about it. And the extract that I'm going to use is on page 83 of Teaching a Stone to Talk, and it's lines 4 through 29. And it's the part of the Europe Providencia where it's talking about the man Alan MacDonald who got burned multiple times. And yeah, so I guess the first quote that I can bring up is on lines 10 through 12 when it says, "He had been a boy and then a burnt boy. He had already been stunned by what could happen, by how life could veer." Yeah, you can see he had been a boy and then a burnt boy. He was normal, and then he was changed by the burn. And the use of stunned, like, it just shows how things changed and veered, like his life just veered. And that feeds into isolation. He's moving away from being normal. And then you can see this is explored further in the next quote that I have, which is lines 19 through 20 of the passage. And it's, "They had not known before they were burned that the world included such suffering, that life could permit them personally such pain." And that's when Dillard is talking about like just burn victims in general. And this feeds into the aspect of isolation, because they didn't know, but burn victims, they didn't know they could suffer this much. They didn't know that there was this much suffering in the world. But that shows that even they could not have empathized, like before they experienced this suffering, they didn't even know that level of suffering existed. And so that shows that people who haven't experienced this level of suffering, they can't really, they don't, there's no one who understands, and that's isolation. So yeah. And then the final quote from that extract that I have is on lines 27 through 28, and it's a quote from Alan MacDonald after the second time he's burned, like 20 years later. He says, "If my friend hadn't been there, I would have jumped into a canal with a rock around my neck." That's right after he gets burnt for the second time. And clearly he's suffering quite a bit. And it also shows, I hate to point it out because it's dark, but clearly his friend does not understand, like, the depth of his misery, because he's trying to stop him from killing himself. MacDonald didn't kill himself, but he says that he definitely would have if his friend hadn't stopped him. And that shows a clear lack of understanding from his friend on the level of suffering that MacDonald is experiencing, and so it shows that there's no empathy. Like, it's just impossible to truly empathize when it comes to certain levels of suffering. And that's what Dillard is showing in The Deer of Providencia. And so yeah, to support this whole theme, there's a bit of wider work evidence here, and it goes back to the actual titular deer. And this quote's from when Dillard is talking about being outside the village and seeing the deer, like, suffering. Here's the quote. "I said to Pepe with pitying glance at the deer, 'Pobrecito,' means poor thing. But I was just trying out Spanish. I knew at the time it was a ridiculous thing to say." And yeah, so that kind of ties it into a bow, she says, with a pitying glance at the deer. It's just pity, it's not true empathy. It's just she sees that, oh, it's suffering, but the deer is just, it's nothing compared to the actual experience of the deer. And she says, "I was trying out Spanish. I knew at the time it was ridiculous." It's ridiculous to suggest that that you can actually sort of relate to the trauma that's occurring with the deer. So yeah, I mean, I think the theme is pretty well laid out in this essay, and it's pretty dark. Suffering is isolation, and it cannot be fathomed by those who haven't experienced it.